What's up,
Yes,
people?
sir.
What's going on, people? Welcome to the Vulcan Soapbox. We're here today to do part two of our Billy Carson West Huff debate. We appreciate all the comments and the likes and the subscribers we got from the last show. We appreciate all the support. All your support helps us to do what we want to do we love to do, which is share how to think critically and break things down from a critical perspective. I've seen a lot of different breakdowns throughout the years on YouTube, reaction videos, all kinds of different things, and people do a lot of great work out there. People focusing on humor, people focusing on giving historical context to things, providing more information. This show does a little bit of that stuff, but primarily our show is meant to focus on how to think more critically, using the tools of epistemology to help people to be able to discern what's true, what's not true. Wes Huff mentioned a lot of great points about how to do that on the show, and we're going to break it down. And that's what our aim is when we address different videos and stuff like that, or even any kind of concept, is to break it down in a more critical level. Some people might consider it nitpicking at times, but the purpose of it is not to cast any aspersions on the people that we're dealing with or deride them in any kind of way. It's really so that the audience can arm themselves with different tools so that whenever they're communicating with their friends and family, even strangers, they can break things down a little bit better than they could before. It's a growing process. We're going to put terminology on the screen that you can learn and utilize on a day-to-day basis. You're going to hear us disagree and agree about certain concepts that's communicated by anybody in the panel or people that we're listening to. So tune in, challenge us in the comments, and we're gonna get to it. I'm going to make it live on Facebook now, fellas. Hold on here. Okay, let's see here. There we go. Edit privacy. It is now public, fellas. Anybody got anything they want to say while I'm on I guess you can't do @follower.
Uncle Vulcan don't know how to work the interwebs, guys.
I guess you can't do @followers anymore, can you?
I'm not sure.
I don't know how to operate on this newfangled contraption.
Yeah. Let's make critical thinking again. Let me read some comments and refresh you. If you want to share anything to us, you can. Help the Bear said, it's time. What's up? What's up, Fresh?
What's up, guys? I like sports, and that's it.
All right, so let's go ahead and get to the video, guys. Where we left off at.
Gospel of Jesus' wife. These are things that actually have provenance that we can verify. And ultimately, I think the answers to the questions of the legitimacy or the illegitimacy of those things point to not just a different conclusion, but actually the opposite conclusion, and that Christianity is true.
Well, now I'm glad you said that. So those three topics are a very small piece of my concept and idea of what really happened in the ancient past. So that's a very small fraction. And that's less than 0.1%. And you talk about eyewitness accounts, it's convinced you that Christianity is real. There's been eyewitness accounts of every culture that I've visited around this entire planet. And their eyewitness accounts of what they experienced is 100,000% opposite of what's in the Bible. People have...
Based on... What do you mean? Can you give me an example?
Who was alive back then? If you've been talking to
they experienced a culture that they claim came to this planet from Sirius B. They have the evidence that they knew these beings were from Sirius B because they have the instruments that show the orbit of a trinary star system that we couldn't discover until the 1970s with our modern technology, okay? They understood not only the orbital pattern of Sirius A, B, and C, but even that B was a failed star, which you can't see it from Earth with the naked eye. They knew that it was a white dwarf. They even knew that they said that if you took a tablespoon of it, the entire tribe or 1,000 men couldn't lift the tablespoon. They understood mass and gravity as well. They were told the shape, the sizes, and the colors of all the planets in our solar system, which they recorded. And there's only one wisdom keeper, and that person can never be touched by a person, If they get touched by another person, they'd actually be killed. And then they eventually have a mentee that they break down that verbally handed down knowledge to. And that next person then takes over and becomes the wisdom keeper. And they've been doing this for thousands and thousands of years.
It sounds like the plot of The Giver.
Science has found all their information to be 1,000% accurate. Then you have the Hopi tribe of the Americas, indigenous tribes, Hopi tribe, Lakota tribe, also having engagements with these quote unquote star brothers, even having an account of them being taken underground, which you don't see just only in America. I just came back from Turkey. You have the people from Turkey and Mesopotamia also being taken underground into a place called Derinkuyu by these beings, by these people, a structure that's built 12 stories deep underground, that's made out of volcanic tuff, a very soft stone. And if you don't know what you're doing, it'll actually collapse. There's no evidence of any collapse. And it was thousands of years old. It was reused many times. So the mainstream story about what it was used for to hide from Romans is actually false. This place is ancient. And in order to build it, you actually have to have foreknowledge of how to construct this type of an underground civilization that can hold 20 to 30,000 people, places for livestock, places for worship, with no sign of collapse. Then you have to have hundreds of ventilation shafts. And I've been down there. Those ventilation shafts cut through solid rock all the way down to the core. And there's even more. It links to other underground cities that are miles and miles away. As you get to the very base of this area, you can cut through and go to another location. But again, these people were taken under. Also, then you have the ancient Egyptians.
So patient, bro.
Major catastrophe comes.
Ramble.
These people come and take them underground.
That's even what I asked you, man.
The information in the Egyptian book of Going Forth by Day. More accounts by people, our ancestors, that have accounts that do not match up with the biblical text. And so all of a sudden we're saying that all these cultures, the Aboriginal people, I can go into them as well. I've gone to walkabouts
Do you mind?
In the outback,
Yeah.
the Aboriginal elders, same thing. They were seeded here by Pleiadians. This is their verbal handed down history for thousands of years. And I can go around the world and I can come up with all this information from all these eyewitness accounts from people that should be respected, dignified, and shouldn't be scoffed. And that we're now saying that all this information that they put forward, all their verbal handed down history, all their written history, that's got to go to the side, because this one text is 1,000% accurate.
Sure, but so my question is, most of that is oral history, correct?
Oh, it's all oral history, even the Bible.
Okay, so when we're engaging with oral history, what methodologies are you using to confirm that the orality is accurate?
Well, first and foremost, some of these texts cultures have written down information in caves. You've got cave paintings. The Dogon tribe actually have not only written down.
Sure. No, I don't disagree with that. The question is one of historic.
Tragic. You don't know
Sorry,
what
I
he's
didn't mean to
doing.
interrupt you there. The question is one of methodological analysis. So you have to have a method by which you can find either that something is falsifiable or that there are avenues by which you can show internal and external accuracy of credibility. So this is what we do with documents. This is what we do with the ancient gospels. This is what I do. I've worked on Xenophon and Plutarch, and we look at the internal evidences and the external multivalent corroboration to try to figure out, okay, yes, we have all these stories. Great. I don't deny that. But as a historian, as someone who's trying to figure out what is accurate, how do you know if I use the term verisimilitude, do you know what that term means?
No, but I can tell you this. Tell me how the Dogon tribe Sirius B knew the orbit of Sirius B, a trinary star system, accurately, and can show you the orbit with a special tool.
Let's go ahead and pause it here.
Given to them by these people. How do they know the?
No, I don't know what sex is, but I bet I can count all the money in your purse really, really fast.
Yeah, this is a prime example where you see that Billy Carson is just out of his depth. And for the audience out there, being out of your depth is not really a knock on you. That's an opportunity for you to learn. If you meet somebody out in the street and then you're doing something, so you're working on your car or you're trying to figure out how to work a new app on your phone, and somebody's next to you and go, oh, look, you know, you're doing that wrong. You could start rambling off, well, no, I do that because of blah, 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 blah. You can start doing all that stuff, or I'm doing the car. You can do all the rambling, or you could just be like, okay, well, how should I be doing it? That's the problem. A lot of these YouTube sensations that pop up, these people that get so famous and big on a certain platform and way of thinking, they can't learn from anybody on the spot in front of anybody. They can't do it. He has to win. He has to be the one has the higher ground in any conversation, which is debilitating for him. And you see this big epic fall that he had after this debate, but it didn't have to be that way. Well, part of it is don't make such extreme claims and such resolved claims about texts that you're not as familiar with. And that goes to this show about epistemology, y'all. Whenever you listen to somebody communicate about different points, remember, the important thing for them to do, I want to mute it. Yeah, one of the most important things to remember when you're listening to somebody is what is their method of research? And that's what Wes is asking. Wes is saying, how are you coming to these conclusions? If you're doing we learned this in school, if you're doing a scientific experiment, what you're going to first do is have your hypothesis. And now you get your hypothesis, you're going to be like, okay, I believe my hypothesis, I'm going to walk off now into the sunset. No, you start to test your hypothesis. That's your test of falsifiability. You notice that's what Wes is saying. He's asking Billy Carson for his process. How do you come to these things? What is your research? How do you utilize the research and filter out your biases and filter out things that aren't necessarily accurate? When he talks about the verisimilitude, when you look it up, y'all, I'm going to put it on the screen here, but it just has to do with things that look more accurate. Now, the word can be used in different contexts and different situations. So like in a book or a movie, verisimilitude may just be actors or the writers are going to make sure that whatever they're putting into the story is believable by the audience. Some things that are not too outlandish, things that look like they could be true. And philosophy is like the study of, what can be true based off of probability. And there's a process, there's a science to it, a science, a knowledge to it. It's not just, I just think it's true because of what I want to believe, or I think it's true because I don't want to believe the alternative. Those are what you see people do on the internet. That's not what he's talking about right here. What is your process? How are you vetting all the different ideas that are out there to make sure that the one you're presenting and teaching to everybody out in the world is the best, most probabilistically true conclusion? So what you see here, he's not doing that. And that's why Wes is like, hey, what is your process? He just kind of laughed. He doesn't. You can tell he never even thought about that before. You're still on mute. You're still on mute, Fresh.
This is what happens when you're not actually interested in being accurate, and you're just looking, which is part of the reason why we do this pod in this fashion, is to warn you against people who will just say anything to gain your views and have you believe them because they sound good when they say it. You can clearly see that Billy Carson is floundering when he's asked questions, and the beauty of it is Wes is not asking difficult questions. He's communicating what he wants to know very well. And the real funny part about it is that Billy Carson technically answered the second time. He said, no, but I can tell you this. So he doesn't even know what verisimilitude means. Mm-hmm. He's not familiar. But keep in mind, he is a self-proclaimed foremost expert on ancient texts and history. And he's not familiar with any of the tools that his peers in these, or I'm going to say his peers in this industry utilize to test their falsifiability, to test their hypothesis on what happened. He's just reading this stuff and taking everybody at their word, clearly, which is weird because if you're taking everybody else at their word, why wouldn't you take Christianity at its word?
It's the verisimilitude, just so you know. But yeah, we can pull that up. But
no.
So yeah, that's a really good point, Fresh. And I think audience, you got to recognize this. Don't feel sorry for Billy Carson. I'm a very empathic person. I'm tempted to feel sorry for him. But you got to remember this point. I'm talking too fast. He's the one who proclaimed himself to be that. He pedestalized himself. Once you ever heard that saying, the bigger they are, the harder they fall? Make more modest claims. if you make more modest claims, you're a lot more safer. So don't feel too sorry for him because of the fact that he is getting torn down in the social media world right now.
It ain't like they ambushed him. He volunteered to come on this program.
Said he got ambushed.
No, how you ambush somebody and he came on the show to do what they did.
They jumped him, man.
Man, the dude in the middle had no part. He was lost.
And they were jumping a dead man.
Oh yeah, he was definitely sick. He almost died 2 days ago.
Yeah. He almost died.
Okay. Now keep in mind, he knows this when he showed up. He wasn't even operating at full capacity when he showed up. Ooh.
I don't know if he really ever has.
Vulcan might have a problem with Billy Carson because them's fighting words.
Well, I'll say this. I want the audience to recognize I don't really have no problem with Billy Carson, but I do have a problem with Billy Carson-like figures. If you really are that nice with it, just like battle rappers do, just like athletes do, just like salespeople do, go out on the big stage and compete.
Show your work.
Show your work.
Show your work. If you could really get busy, get out there with other folks who get busy.
You reading this?
Billy Carson is a high schooler playing middle school kids.
Yeah.
And everyone's saying he's the greatest until he plays a varsity player.
Mm-hmm.
And then we find out, oh, and I see why you're on JV now. It bothers me that it's so obvious.
We got this term up. You want to is Enos reading it? Do you want to read that or want me to read it?
Verisimilitude is a philosophical or theoretical notion that distinguishes truth and falsity of assertions or hypotheses. The problem of verisimilitude is the problem of articulating what it takes for one false theory to be closer to truth than another theory. This is very poorly punctuated. Verisimilitude is described in storytelling by the way the audience contributes to their experience by their willing acceptance that even when events or people in a movie are not realistic, if the filmmaker's vision is consistent, it gives us the sense that in that world, these things could happen. So in short, it's the appearance of truth.
Yeah, that's a really good point because a lot of times we're watching a lot of these DC and Marvel movies. Obviously, we already know we're going to be in the world of the fantastic and fanciful and sci-fi and all that good stuff, the magical world of Harry Potter. But in that world, we still need to have, I didn't see you consistent. You can't have it where Spider-Man can lift the car in one scene, and another scene, he's trying to pick up a guy and he's struggling.
Yeah, but they nerf these superheroes all the time. So maybe Billy Carson has a point.
So it's okay to nerf the guy as long as the nerf that they choose to use, they stay consistent with that storyline. We'll be like, okay, I guess that's believable or not believable. But whenever they start to shift from that, you're like, whoa, I don't believe it. Once you start to disbelieve that they're sticking to some type of consistency and that these things are actually possible, even in the world that's outlandish already, then that's when you start to lose faith in the actual work itself. So keep that in mind. But yeah, we can keep on going, unless you have something fresh.
Yes, sir. Let's read some of these comments and then we can move on, fellas. Dr. A. Williams said, ready for this knowledge. Shout out to Dr. A. Williams.
Dr. A.
Intro said, hi. Al. Hey, I know what this is. Shout out to Into. I'm sorry. Shout out to Into. Brandon Duff says Billy and his word salads. That's funny.
Filling out the mouth.
All right, let's get back into it.
If you have any questions about related topics, definitely put them in the comments. We'll read them out and try to do our best to answer the questions about whatever the topics of the day today.
Shapes, the size of the colors, and the orbital pattern of all these planets in the solar system, and other star alignments that they would use to have something called the Ziggy and planet and their own harvesting and planting and so forth and so on. That's not enough evidence that there's something.
Well, I'm not Yeah, I'm not aware of that particular case. And even, I mean, I would grant that, you know, the ancient people are far more technological advanced than we give themselves credit for. Just because they're ancient doesn't mean they're stupid. I am well aware, as someone who has done both investigation of the past and done archaeological analysis, that is a reality. My question is simply, okay, you have these stories or you have these accounts, you're referring to them as eyewitness testimony. How are you going about verifying that as that?
Well, if people had eyewitness testimony about Jesus, they then just wrote in their eyewitness testimony on a piece of paper or parchment paper or papyrus. So these
Right.
people,
So that's where
some
internal
of it's-
methodological
some
analysis.
of it's actually written down. So I mean, it's the same exact thing. There's really no difference.
Well, no. So you do internal investigations to figure out when something was dated. So something like there's, when I use that term verisimilitude before, that's something we as historians are looking for. It's a term that simply means the appearance or likelihood of truthfulness. So when you do historical analysis, it's an inference to the best explanation. So you have proof and you have data, and you're extrapolating that data on levels of probability. So some things can be confirmed as high probabilistically true, and other things are lower in their probability that they happened. But there are different methodologies, different ways that you explore historically how that happens.
Well,
So for the
that
Gospels, you look at
was with the Dogon. Scientists went there to visit the tribe, and they still have no answers because they used their modern science. They took the best scholars to visit these people, and they're still scratching their heads. Something happened there.
sure.
That
And
doesn't.
I'm not even denying that necessarily, but the question is, okay, we need different levels of evidence and exploration, not just scientifically, but historically, to derive something as eyewitness testimony. Now we have mountains of that, and I'm more than willing to go into some of that with the Gospels as early eyewitness testimony that can be verified externally and internally. But nonetheless, the only reason I ask, Billy, is because I've listened to a fair amount of your content, and I'm unaware of the methods that you use to try to discern between what is an accurate source historiographically and an inaccurate source historiographically.
Well,
Does that make sense?
I use getting in an airplane and traveling to these places, doing my own research, talking with indigenous cultures, and researching as much of the text that is available that I can possibly find.
Okay. So I don't dispute that. And I do believe you have done that. But I mean, even from what we've talked about, so you've researched the text, but when we talked about the crucifixion, everything you cited was either, and I mean with all due respect, false in terms of the Sinai Bible, because Codex Sinaiticus is just the 4th century Greek manuscript of the Gospels that we have today, or they were verified forgeries in terms of the Gospel of Jesus' wife and the Gospel of Barnabas.
You may be right on that particular part of the topic, but like I said, that's less than 0.1% of the information that I hold.
Sure, but that was the original question. So yeah. So that's what I'm saying. I'm saying, okay, well, so I'm going off of what we've already talked about. So you said you explore the text. I don't deny that. But the evidence, by going off of what you have put forward in terms of the actual documentary evidence, is not just less than convincing in my respect. And I mean this with respect, because I think you have done a lot of research. You've traveled to these places. I have too. Like, this is what I do as my career. But I'm not really getting indication, because in history, we go to the primary sources in their primary languages. And when Mark asked, okay, why do you deny the crucifixion? The sources you used were not primary.
Okay, we're still talking
and
about the same thing over and over again. There's so much more we can talk about here. We're wasting a lot of
Let's pause it right here.
Real quick, I want to point out they're still talking about the same thing because he hasn't answered the question yet.
Yes,
He hasn't presented any methodology at all yet.
exactly. And the thing is, he thinks we're on the same topic, but really, Wes is kind of shifted, because he's talking about him now. Like, you are not referencing sources that are legitimate. So it's not about this particular topic. It's about his character.
I don't even think he's calling them not legitimate. He's more saying you don't know if they're legitimate because you don't have a methodology to verify their legitimacy.
Well, yeah, he did say that they weren't legitimate, the ones he did quote. But yeah, you're right. I think he's more saying you wouldn't know one way or the other because you're not even in a position to decipher that. So when Billy Carson audience is talking about this is you know, I've been doing all this research on foremost expert, you don't even know how to do the research. Anybody can go and read what somebody else wrote about something else. Anybody that has the finance to do can go to a site and look at something. You could take somebody I could go take somebody to go look at a car right now. Doesn't mean know how to put a car together and take it apart and know how to fix things within the car. You can go look at anything you want. You could even say, hey, this is a car. That's a tire. That's a window. It does not mean they're a mechanic. Doesn't mean they're a mechanical engineer.
Yeah.
And that's the distinction you're seeing here. You have a mechanical engineer on the call, and you have somebody who likes cars.
To simplify it, I can send Vulcan a text message describing something that I'm looking at right now. And just because I wrote it down doesn't mean that that's the way it happened. That's what's actually happening. It's just a perspective from one perspective. The methodology of falsifiability is you have to get multiple perspectives. You have to get proofs. There has to be corroborating stories and witnesses. There's a whole science to it. And Billy Carson seems to be saying, like, I mean, they wrote it down, so clearly it happened. But I would also, again, challenge, if that is his belief, then why is he so dead set against Christianity? While also saying that it matches, it passes the same sniff test that all his research does. It's written down. Somebody wrote it down. The eyewitnesses said it happened, but he's willing to go against Christianity. This is where it kind of shows, right? It kind of shows his slip is showing in terms of the fact that he actually has a problem against Christianity personally. That's why he's going against it so hard. I could see if he was saying things like, you can't prove anything, or you can prove everything as long as it's written down. So it's all true in a way, but he's not. He's saying these two things follow the same method, yet I think one of these is true and one of these is not true. The one that I like is true and the other one is not because I don't like it. There's not a drop of logic or reasoning involved in that in that thought process, and this is what his opponent is trying to point out.
Yep, exactly. So, as we can continue. Intellectual virtues, people.
Do you guys
so much
more stuff to talk about?
Do you think that all these different cultures and stuff describing these other beings?
Here goes your boy, Fresh.
Could
They
those
jump
have
him right
been?
now.
I'm not an expert theologian or whatever, but like where it talks about war, I always want to personally ask you this too, where in the Bible it talks about like wars between the demons and the angels. There's a lot of crazy stuff in the Bible too that you can prove it's been written, but it also takes some faith because you can't physically see where there was wars between demons and angels and stuff fighting in the heavens. So there's tons going on. Obviously, could any of those have been, like, from what you've discovered or how people have written it? Do you think those could have been demons or
Pause it
angels?
real quick,
I don't think
I don't believe in
discredits.
demons or angels at all.
You don't believe in them
Pause
at
it
all?
real quick. I just want to point out that Billy Carson, his wife, several other pundits on social media have said that this gentleman, the moderator, kind of double teamed or jumped Billy Carson. I want to point out whenever he speaks, actually listen to what he's saying and where his questions are leaning to. If anything, they're jumping Wes in this scenario. So again, this is the victim role that Billy Carson is playing after he got absolutely demolished in this, quasi debate. Because I call it quasi because it's really one-sided. One of them is debating, the other person is lost out here.
Yeah, one of them reading off their script, and the other one's trying to have a dialogue, an exchange. Wes's patience that he exhibited in this discussion is
Crazy.
Spectacular.
Almost godlike, wouldn't you say? See what I did there?
No.
Yes, sir.
Nah, I don't
All right,
believe in demons
Nose.
or angels. When you read Azazel coming down in the book of Enoch, coming down, and the first thing he does is teach people how to make knives and swords so they can cut a man's head off. You read,
Yeah, sorry about that. The guys that's in the chat, sorry about that. I got to read some comments and get right back into the video. Help the Bear said Tony Stark's into internal conflict about his responsibility for his invention in the Iron Man films.
That's a good parallel.
Yeah, good movie, good movie. Help the Bear said, hey, like and subscribe. Yeah, for the audience, everybody that's tuning in, make sure you like, share, and subscribe, please. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
you see these quote unquote.
Where's that in the book of Enoch?
In the book of Enoch, Azazel. He comes down and he teaches.
Where is that in the book of Enoch? Is it the only reason I ask is because there are two Enochs, first Enoch and second Enoch, and only first Enoch is an actual historical amalgamation.
Okay. And then you analyze the fact that these angels are having sex, they're getting drunk. These are just people.
Whoa. Where are angels getting drunk?
Angels party, they go, they hang out with people, they go to war with people, they put on their outfits and they go to war with people. This is
where are they getting drunk though?
They get married, okay, whatever that means. But they
don't get married.
Okay. Not
in
married.
fact, Scripture says that angels can't get
like
married.
Merry Christmas.
Not married. Mary.
This man is quoting Hancock right now.
But the point that I'm making here is when you start to really analyze what these angels are doing, and you start to analyze how many people are dying in the biblical text, you start to say, well, how many people did Satan actually kill? And when you start doing the tally on the numbers, God's doing most of the killing in the Bible. It's not the devil that's doing all the killing. And then God says in Isaiah, I created the good and I created the evil. Do what I say at the Lord. So he's saying that he's doing the good and the evil. That's what he's saying.
Yeah.
My personal opinion on this whole thing, I just let me get this out because we keep going over the same rhetoric over and over again. My personal opinion is that the biblical text is a good book. There's I've got videos. My number one video on Twitter has me saying this. It's good text.
He says we keep going over the same rhetoric over and over again. Yes, we're going over your rhetoric over and over again.
He hasn't answered one question, bro.
You've been going over your rhetoric over and over again, and nobody has been able to challenge you because you haven't spoken to anybody that is familiar with the material that you're covering. And for the first time, you have somebody who's familiar with the material, ready to have an exchange with you, and ready to jump off the topic as soon as he calls you out or asks for clarification about a point that you've made on multiple platforms on numerous occasions, and now it's a problem.
He's making them here. Wes is challenging things he's saying right now, and he's pivoting, dodging these questions. I just to the audience who's watching, when you're looking at these types of things, you have to watch people's mannerisms and the way that they answer questions or don't answer questions. Those are signs of ignorance. And while it's not bad to be ignorant, it is bad to be ignorant while while purporting yourself as an expert. He's really being judged down right now. And I'm gonna be 100% honest. I don't even think he realizes how badly he's doing. Because I don't think he understands a lot of what Wes is referring to or talking to, which is why he's not able to respond to them at all. He's just like, okay, yeah. And then he said what he was going to say.
Look how it froze Wes' face. That's how Wes feels internally right now. Like, I'm cooking this guy with history style.
This is let me say it for Wes. This nigga.
Yeah.
That's funny.
It's crazy. And so you got the middleman. Oh, sorry.
It's nasty work.
A lot of people showing love in the comments. Khalif said, say Hazel name while denying Noah is nasty work.
Oh.
Lisi says, is this the debate discrediting Billy Wright? The title part 2, meaning this is their second debate. No, I'm sorry about that. If it not understanding the part 2, this is our part 2 actually breaking down this debate, Elise. All right.
The second half of this debate. We only did the first half, the first video.
I'm sorry. Yeah, second half. You was about to say something, Vulcan?
I don't remember what I was going to say. Oh yeah, I was going to talk
Alright.
about the middleman. The middleman, yeah, as Fresh already said, he's more on the side of Billy, and we'll see here. He's going to go even further into it. So I just like the audience to just bear with us because I'm going to try to address some of the things that this middleman, I think his name was Marcus, saying, but it's a bunch of gobbledygook, and it's going to be all over the place.
Today,
Yeah.
Vulcan got time. We got energy. We're gonna give you some attention.
Yeah, one thing I did know, especially when this video first started, when Wes would ask him questions, he would say things like, when Wes would ask him what is his methodology, he would say, my methodology is me getting on the plane and talking to, I guess, what he considered experts, like the Dogon family. Right there, that's an example of practicing that appeal to authority. Matter of fact, let me pull that up for a minute. Let's share this tab. All right, appeal to authority, insisting the claim is true simply because a valid authority or expert on the issue said is true without any other supporting evidence offered. Also see appeal to false authority. I'm not going to pull it up. Just to simplify, just to give the audience the, guess, get what this is saying. I'll give you an example, maybe like something in sports, maybe like a basketball player of a coach, a well-known coach say this is the best basketball player ever. You take his word because he's a famous coach, so to speak. I could just break it down like that. Y'all got anything y'all want to add before we get back into the video?
Yeah, just audience to recognize we're going to be putting terminology up here to help arm you in the future so you don't be deceived. I see a lot of people in the comments that I've watched a lot of different videos on this at this point. Mm-hmm. A lot of folks said that they were misled by Billy Carson. This conversation right here is what I'm liberated.
Yeah. Well, the appeal to authority applies to people who would regurgitate things that Billy Carson says in debates and arguments outside of that conversation, and now they're realizing that all they're doing is repeating something that someone that they saw as an authority said without doing any research or validation. I heard Billy Carson say he sounds really good saying it, so I'm gonna say it. And now you're finding out that he don't know what the hell he was talking about either.
My mama said alligators are honorary because all the teeth and no toothbrush.
For sure. An example.
My mama said it.
And for this, just to help y'all out, audience, because this helped me out. You want to think of some questions when you hear somebody, because Billy has said on multiple platforms he's an expert. Just ask some questions about specific sources that he's referencing, and ask him to interpret things beyond his personal research. So that's a way to ask the so-called experts to really elaborate, explain, where they're getting this information from. So. Yeah, just be on the lookout for that. These type of things help you out to vet the people that you are listening to. Elsie says, "Is the debate discredited?" Okay, we already read that before.
You already read that one.
Okay. I was gonna see how far he's gonna go before you noticed it too. I was
like, okay, copy that. Ti, my bad. Oh no, it ain't your bad. It's all good. All right, let's get back to the video, fellas.
Because if you actually apply some of the information that's in the Bible, you can get a good result, like you have done, Mark.
Right. I struggle with I know I want you to finish your thought. Go ahead.
Yeah. So because you can get a good result, but there's a lot of misinformation in the Bible. There's a lot of false information that's copy from ancient text. And if you go by that text, all of a sudden you end up with 400 years of slavery. You end up with abuse. You end up with divide and conquer tactics that separate people. You end up with people thinking that they're the chosen ones and they're the chosen people. And we've been promised this promised land so we can eradicate another race of people because this is our land, because God promised it to us. You have people that want to go on the papal inquisitions and torture and kill and murder over 80 million people. You have the American Holocaust, 111 million indigenous natives slayed. You have all this going on because of this text, which is set up so contradictory throughout its path across time. You get into the New Testament, slavery is still being condoned in the New Testament.
Was it?
Honor thy slave master as you would honor God or Jesus, it says, I believe. So in Ephesians. So
well, it doesn't. It doesn't say that. But
the God of the Old Testament, like, I'll let you go real quick. But I'm just, and I know you have to go soon too.
Let that man talk.
That man's patience is crazy.
It was always. I'm telling you guys, this is where Jesus came in and changed everything for me. But like the Old Testament too, it is hard for me to read. Even Noah, thinking God's like mad at everyone. Let's flood the whole world and murder all these people that I created.
That's pretty bad stuff.
But it seems so contradictory to, and I'm speaking, Wes, as a Christian, and I don't have the whatever they call papyrus. There isn't. This is where people but I continue to follow in my heart. But it's so Jesus did not seem like that at all. But they say God's the same as then as he was now. Like time, he created time. So he didn't come down, as Jesus and change and evolve and then come back with new information and be like, you know what, I don't think I'm going to flood and do. So these are more, I guess, like bigger moral questions that there's not necessarily, but that's where things like the Old Testament challenge me at times. And I know there's a lot of things where they correlate, and I've seen some cool things that come together too, but it's just like, man, to think like I'm going to flood and murder all these people that I created and then leave a few alive doesn't seem like what Jesus did at all.
Sorry to interrupt
No,
you, but
it's
there's
all
a couple more points I want to make because he got a lot of talking in.
Hey,
Paul,
pause real quick.
Your earthly masters with respect and fear.
The middleman was talking so much, Billy Carson had to put that hand on his shoulder like, hey, shut up.
You sound stupid.
Sound crazy.
You sound worse than me. That's hard to do. And then he said, hold on, let me finish my point because Wes is about to talk again. Like Wes been dominating this conversation.
Yeah, that's crazy. So like I want to cover a few things he mentioned, and some of this stuff Wes will touch on, some of the things he won't touch on. But one thing he talked about, like, about the 400 years of slavery, because of the Bible, we have 400 years of slavery. That is absolutely absurd. One, we know the Arab slave trade that came from the Quran or their culture, whatever you want to say, not from the Bible. Over 20 million Africans were castrated and sold into slavery and stuff like that. So slavery was around before the Bible was written, after the Bible was written. Slavery is around all kinds of different cultures around the world. Slavery, that's where they get to that. That's where you get to that principle of correlation doesn't equal causation. Just because there's a correlation between the Bible and slavery, the Bible mentions slavery. The Bible slavers, mention the Bible. Because you got that concept going, it doesn't mean that there's a causation that because of the Bible there's slavery. And that's the implication that Billy Carson would like us to have, which is unfair to the Bible and to the people who wrote the Bible. The reality is the reality of it is slavery was everywhere. You're gonna see in the scriptures it being addressed and talked about on how to do it, how not to do it. What's okay, what's not okay. And I want the audience to understand that the word slave in the Bible has different meanings, just for the same word. Now, we may not have different words to describe or to translate whatever that word is in the Greek to the English. So it might be bondservant, it may be servant, it may be slave. There's other concepts that are there. So don't just assume every time you read slave, you're seeing that. Think about those of us who are ancestors came from chattel slavery. Don't assume that it's something like that. Some people sold themselves into slavery in the Old Testament to get out of debts and stuff like that. There's a whole lot of context there. There's Roman slavery, there's Hebrew slavery, there's slavery that was happening around the world. So you got to understand that anytime somebody's trying to say, "Oh, the Bible created slavery," the Bible endorsed slavery, that's not necessarily true.
It is definitely not, because if we're talking about just someone giving their eyewitness statements in a lot of these books, i.e. the Gospels, and they're talking about slavery, they're recounting things that were happening while they were there.
Yeah.
You would think that would actually validate the claim that the Bible didn't create slavery. Nowhere in the Bible does it talk about anyone in the Bible starting slavery or initiating the slave trade. It's just saying like, hey, this is what's happening. Almost so much as it's normal that they don't even really go into like the inherent evils of slavery. It's just like, hey, slavery was happening and then this. So it's I don't want to say an eyewitness statement, but it's someone recounting their personal experiences in a lot of instances that are talking about slavery. I don't see like anywhere where it makes sense that the Bible is what created slavery.
Yeah, that's that people thinking that correlation equals causation, which is a fallacy to think that correlation equals causation.
Lawrence Lewis says the slavery in the Bible was not the same as the transatlantic slavery. In the Bible, you could substitute it for indentured servant. Also, there were rules for how well they were to be treated. 100% correct. 100% correct. Also, the term was to end after 7 years in the Bible. It is important to approach the Bible with full context of the points and principles, or the points and principles would be missed.
Absolutely.
Well said, Lawrence. Well said.
Here, as sincerity of heart, obey Christ. That's slaves. Obey your earthly masters with respect and fear, with sincerity in your heart, just as you would obey Christ. So it does say that in Ephesians 6:5, but there's so many aspects.
That stuff is what.
And what is the context of what Ephesians is saying? So I think this is very important because we don't take text in isolation. So within Scripture, and this is why all the abolition movements throughout history have only been Judeo-Christian movements. There's never been an abolition movement that wasn't Christian. And actually, there's the recent work by historian Tom Holland, not the Spider-Man actor, different Tom Holland, but his recent Dominion highlights this fact very well. This is not a Christian, but in it, he shows that going right back into the antiquity with the Cappadocian Fathers was the first abolition movement, and then into the British and the American abolition movements. These were fundamentally Christian movements ran by Christians because of the idea that when Paul, who wrote that letter to Ephesians, says, in Christ there is no slave nor free, he's breaking down those barriers. So in Ephesians, when he says, slaves obey your masters, he's operating on the socioeconomic context of what he's going on. And he's saying, hey, we have slaves and we have free people, okay? If you're a believing slave, if you're a slave who believes in Jesus as the Messiah, don't be equitable in how you are living your life. Reflect Christ accurately. And that's a movement that he is fundamentally working towards, that eventually starts to completely take out the legs from the slavery movement in general.
I would be.
Go ahead and pause it right there.
This is all just
Yeah.
three grown-ups talking in a healthy way.
So yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, if you watch any of the reaction videos, they'll swear that technology was working against Billy Carson, and anytime he tried to say something, it cut out. I just want you. I'm just pointing out the wild accusations that are completely unfounded. It's really gives to the desperation of the whole situation.
Yeah, you're saying because of course his wife and himself both accused the moderator Mark and the one that he's having a discussion with, Wes, of jumping him and debating a dead man and interrupting him when he was communicating, and also jumping off screen anytime he made a really good point, an important point, which you can see when you watch this debate doesn't happen at all. If anything, right now you see the moderators tilting more towards Billy, which is fine. He should tilt wherever he thinks that he agrees with, unless there's a formal debate where they want the moderator to be more unbiased. But this doesn't seem like a formal debate.
It's
so
definitely
that's fine.
not.
He mentioned some other concepts I want to cover, and for the audience who may just jumped on, you may not have heard it. He talks about the Holocaust being caused by the Bible. That's definitely not true at all. Matter of fact, a lot of times you'll see whatever Hitler himself would refer to the Jews as not even human. He dehumanized them because he knew that the Bible would say that everybody's made in the image of God. So you see that even when it comes to Hitler and what happened in Germany, that wasn't from the Bible. The Bible never consented to those kind of things. Man stealing is a crime. So anytime people talk about slavery itself, it's forbidden in the Bible and it's very punishable, to man steal. So we talk about people being taken off the coast of Africa and brought over here to America. That's not sanctioned by the scriptures. Talk about the Crusades. The Crusades, I'm not going to go into all this stuff, but the Crusades have a lot of historical significance. It wasn't just about people saying, I'm Christian, I'm going to go out here with a sword and make y'all all Christian. There was something going on in the world dealing with Islam, and it was also a competition for resources and power. And you got to understand that the state or the government and the religion, those are two different entities. So somebody may say, hey, I'm a Christian, I'm a Muslim, I'm a Hindu, whatever it is, and they do whatever they do politically. That doesn't mean they represent the religion that they're operating under. Humans are able to do what they want to do, whatever their beliefs are. People can use the same book to justify different types of things. So what he's saying that it's the Bible that calls these things, we know that's not true because these things existed before the Bible. These things existed after the Bible. These things existed during the Bible. The Bible's whole point is that mankind is evil and men do evil things. And it's the grace of God that restrains men from being as evil as they otherwise would be. That's why Wes is making the comment that you don't see any abolitionist movements outside of Christian movements. Throughout all of human history, from Korea to the Slavs to everywhere you want to go, nobody had an issue with slavery except the slave. The ones who were not the slaves appreciated it, and the ones who were the slaves had slaves previously. It was people who were not slaves and not slave owners through Christianity that said, you know what, whether you're a slave or you're not a slave, this whole practice is not right. We need to do something better than this. But remember, in the biblical context, slavery served a purpose. There were no HEBs, there were no Krogers, anything like that. So if you needed food and there was a famine, you were going to starve unless you found somebody that had resources, had a storehouse, and you say, hey, I'm going to work for you. I'm gonna step under you, or you're in a debt. There's people right now and hundreds of thousands of debt, millions of dollars of debt that'll have, and it drives them crazy. Some people delete themselves over that debt. Imagine the system like you find in the Bible, as Lewis pointed out, that after 7 years, hey, it was wiped clean.
Man, that man's name is born. You wilding out.
How much of a relief?
Are you saying we should bring slavery back?
Well, slavery is still here. Y'all, and I want people in the audience to recognize that slavery is still happening in this world right now. So that outrage we feel when we hear slavery, where is it in the real world right now? It's still happening.
Where at?
All different kind of places in the world. It happened right here in America. I get notifications on my phone all the time about it, and I have children. So you got to understand how important it is for me when I see certain types of trafficking going on.
Ooh.
Another type of slavery.
Good point. Good point.
Right under our nose.
Good point.
So take the outrage you feel for the slavery that our ancestors endured, and have that same type of vitriol for the slavery you see right now.
They can't, because it doesn't attach to the church hurt that they're dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
They can't direct that hatred at the church, so it's not worth it.
So we got the false cause. So a false cause, a logical fallacy that incorrectly assumes a causal relationship between two events or phenomena based on mere correlation or coincidence. I'm sure this happens all the time. You ever been accused of something just because you happen to be at a certain place or a certain time, and it's like, oh, because there's a correlation here, you caused it.
I know you stole my cell phone. How you know that? You was over there when I went missing. Huh?
Yep.
That don't mean I stole it.
So you gotta understand, y'all. This is an important concept right here. This whole idea of assuming because there's a correlation, that there's a causation there, and that's what we're talking about here. And that's part of what Billy's doing when he makes those points. Last thing I want to mention is the chosen people. He mentions about there being a chosen people. So in the Bible, there is a chosen people, but we got to understand that it's not much to brag about. It's kind of like, I won't even give an analogy. I'll just use what the Bible actually says about the chosen people in the Bible. The people that were chosen in the Bible, the people of Israel, were not chosen because they were the smartest or the fastest or the strongest or the most numerous of people. It says they were not the most numerous of people. And anybody who has read the text understands that God tends to show his power and glory in the meager of vessels. So that whenever you have that success, you can't be like,
it was me.
That was me. And I want to take this time also to address a lot of the bad theology we have in our music. I remember Marvin Sapp had a song that says, "He only saw the best in me." That's not biblical doctrine. God didn't choose you because he saw the best in you. He looked at Gideon and said, you know, what a mighty, valiant warrior. And he wasn't mighty and valiant. He called him that, but he wasn't even that. God will use whoever he chooses. God will use a donkey.
Hey, real quick, don't do that no more.
Which part?
Don't try to sing no more.
He said, which part? You singing. That's the part.
You singing, brother.
Angelic voice, man. See?
You made a valid point. I know as soon as you start singing up, people, the viewers was like, he's wrong.
Shout out to Baby Lion. He says West Huff agrees with the enslavement of people, calling Judeo-Christian British English slavery equity and telling slaves to be. Oh man, y'all going to address that?
I don't even understand. He said West Huff agrees with enslavement of people, calling Judeo-Christian British English slavery equity and telling slaves to be equitable.
I mean, you want to address it? You want me to address that?
Go ahead. You got it.
So, yeah. So West says in this point right here about the Bible's talking about being equitable when it comes to slavery and equity. Yes, you got to understand this right here. If you are a child of God, we are to be a child of God whether we are enslaved or not. Just because we're enslaved don't mean we can do what we want to do. Because you understand our purpose is not just joy or happiness or getting all we can, canning all we get, and sitting on it. Our role as believers is to glorify God in all that we do. I've read countless books from Torture for Christ to Revolution and World Ministries where Christians have been put in or tortured and put into encampments because they were Christian and being tortured by their captors. Even told, you know, I love, you know, I'm enjoying the God I don't believe in who's allowing me to torture you in this way. They've had Christians in dungeons that they couldn't even stretch their body out. They have to fight rats at night that want to eat their bodies because the rats are starving. They've had Christians put in place where they had to, they were giving a communion, which was feces and urine as the cracker and the wine for a communion. They were tortured by being susceptible to having to eat that kind of stuff and drink that kind of stuff. So understand that even in those situations, those Christians, when you read the books and stuff like that and listen to the things, they were told they were still glorifying God and praising God in those situations. And they were still treating their captors with a certain level of godliness because that's what the mandate is from God. Now you may not agree, but telling a slave to treat their slave owner like you treat Christ, or you get a job, that's what we're commanded to do. That's not an endorsement of slavery. Even throughout the Roman Empire, when Christians for the first 325 years of Christianity were being tortured and being set on fire, tarred and set on fire, and having lions put on them and stuff like that. When you read the historical account, they were singing to their death, praising God, because they were chosen to suffer like Christ suffered.
It's like if your child is getting bullied at school, you teach them, some parents teach their child not to resort to physical violence because of the forethought of where it will get them. And it doesn't represent the household well. But in to further that
I was told they put their hand on you, make sure they don't do it again.
And that's my point. You will go up there as the father, the parent, the protector to do that job. That's why you're able to tell them, hey, you don't do that because you got me. You don't make those decisions. You don't make those crunch time decisions. You go tell the teacher, you come tell me, and I will fight your battles for you. At no point in time, even in the Bible, it says that Christians are going to be persecuted for being Christ-like. Christ, who admittedly was the most powerful entity ever, he never said that he wasn't, took backlashes and carried a cross and was hung upon it, knowing he didn't have to be, to show the Christ-like sacrifice. It's really weird that people want to align already established doctrine with their own beliefs. Like, I don't like being picked on. I don't like when people talk to me, and I want to fight. So now, because the Bible says I can't fight, all of a sudden the Christianity is wrong and not you. That's a very self-centric way to look at the world, and it can't hold up. It never does. Many times in history, those types of values, those self-centric values, fail all throughout history. You're simply saying, I want this established doctrine to fall in line with what I believe, and if it doesn't, then it's wrong and not me. But that's not how it works.
This is an answer to the question that they had up there, or you just
say again?
I was saying, is this an answer to the comment that we were just reading?
Partially, yeah. It was more of a caveat on what you were talking about.
I got you. So yeah, I want to just conclude that the answer to that question. You got to understand that Christianity was not a political movement; it was a social movement which supersedes political movements. Political movements are the representatives of a society that are in power, that control what's going to happen as far as polity goes and policy. But the reality is that they all come from the people. Christianity is a social movement that started off with slaves and merchants and women and children and stuff like that. It wasn't a belief that was held by the majority of those who were in power. It was like a snowball, and it kept building and building and building until eventually in 325 AD in the Council of Nicaea, it becomes a religion that's accepted. And people are allowed to practice it out and openly without being tortured or persecuted for it. So you got to understand that whenever you're reading the writings of the Bible, it's not there to write policy. It's there to write on people's hearts. And that's what it was doing. So it's saying, hey, look, you're under this economic system where there's slavery and other things going on. This is how you should conduct yourself in that situation. It's not saying, hey, look, go over there to Rome, go to Caesar and tell him the slavery is wrong and uproot that. That's not what Christians were doing. That's not what they were told to do.
Expected to do. Yeah.
They were told to go out and save souls.
Yeah.
And you're going to be persecuted. And a lot of y'all aren't going to make it. But Christ suffered, and you were sharing his suffering, but you'll be rewarded.
It's very flesh-like to go in and fight back. It's very Christ-like to remain humble while experiencing persecution. That's the example that's set that will have people ask you, and I've seen this in real life, is, hey.
Fresh, you might get a few more comments. So get some comments in here. We have,
as soon as I finish my statement. Is what the sacrifice, that thing that you do that's so outside of the norm that it has to be attributed to a higher entity. That's what has people asking, hey, what is it about you? What are you doing? What is it about the God that you serve that allows you to remain calm, that allows you to remain humble under these circumstances? Anybody can wild out. It's what the flesh wants to do. Yeah. It's the sacrifice, it's the humility while being persecuted that shows the sacrifice of Christ. That's why it's like that. It's not designed for you to wild out. That's why, a lot of militant folks, they prefer a religion that aligns with their militancy, their aggressiveness, because I want to fight back. And I'm not knocking you. I'm just saying it's odd to me that people keep trying to make Christianity match something that these are not what it was designed for. And it's clearly documented in the book what it's for.
Yeah, and both groups, the slave and the slaver, are given instructions as Christians. So you see that in the book of Philemon. So keep that in mind, audience. Vulcan Soapbox, check that stuff out, y'all. Slavery was never meant to be dealt with politically in the Bible. As the people's heart changed and the social movements grew, just like you see in abolitionists throughout history with the Quakers and different groups that started to take an issue with slavery, and you see ultimately it was overthrown. It was a social movement that just kept snowballing until it was a big enough movement to where it stopped. Now nobody politically most people politically wouldn't want to go back to slavery. But if they would have did it the other way, like we're going to get our knives, we're going to strike everybody down who believes in slavery, doesn't change the heart. That's fear. That's intimidation.
Correct.
So keep that in mind. That's not going to do what ultimately happened, what we have now
And
today.
we keep blaming the tool for the sins of the tool wielder, right? Yes, slavery was wrong. If you want to say that slave masters utilized the Bible to help further their cause in slavery, you could say that. That doesn't indicate the Bible, the tool.
Yeah, they
in
use
the crime.
slavery. They use the Bible. They use clothes. They use words. They use sweat. They use land. They use sticks and weapons and stuff. They use guns. All that
Those,
stuff right now because it was used during.
all those things are not now inherently evil because they were used in the furtherance of a crime or evil.
Yeah, but I don't like speakers because people used to speak to slaves to tell them what to do.
All right, Juanita Johnson said, Billy appears to be someone who never had anyone challenge the validity of the content shared. His comments recently made on his channel was insensitive and insulting to poor people. Yeah, that was pretty bad. If y'all got to see that 3 hour, he took it down, by the way. But yeah, that was pretty bad.
He showed naked behind his naked gluteus maximus on that one.
I don't like that.
Let's get
his
back
naked
into the
posterior on that one.
Wow.
The funny thing is, he got to realize, well, he doesn't realize, but what y'all got to realize is that the majority of people that support Billy Carson are poor, uneducated people who are looking for someone to say something that they like. That's his target audience. And he on here talking bad about it. Shame on him.
Well, I did say we was gonna play the video, but we got a question for the panel. LC said, "I'm just confused how the Council of Nicaea isn't that a false cause." Y'all want to address that before we move on?
Yeah, I don't get the question. How the Council of Nicaea isn't a false cause? Can you rewrite that for us a little bit? Give us more insight on that.
Can you clarify what you're actually asking?
Yeah,
LP.
I definitely want to answer the question if I can understand a little bit better.
All right,
let's go.
I think this is going to give us, but this is where you and I sitting down in the room, I would be like, great that you came to that, but like, what were the methodologies did you use to conclude that him saying the slave be the master to the slave, you're able to interpret it meaning that he's meaning that? Because I was also raised in the church and I would question when they're like, oh, in the old days when they said women don't wear jewelry, that's a sin. You would know the exact verse. And then they're like, oh, but that was just written because at that time that was what they did. But then the next week they're telling me, but if you believe in the Bible.
It's always disappointing when somebody realizes you know more than they do. And so they assume you know everything. So he goes, you wouldn't know the exact verse. Just because I know a lot more than you don't mean I know the exact verse. I'm not omniscient. I don't know all things. So because what that ends up doing, audience, is that starts setting this false expectation. Oh, he's gonna know the answer to every question. Everybody you see from Billy Carson to Mark and to Wes had to learn this stuff, and the learning is not done. I've been in those situations where I know, James, you would know. Why do you assume that I'm gonna know that? I know some things, I don't know everything. Some things I've forgotten. You know that there's studies that show, audience, all the folks out there, that the next day after you read a book, you'll remember 40% of what you read the day before. 40%, not even 50%. Think about the next day and a week and a month from now. That's why folks that brag about all the books they read, I'm always like, well, one, how much of the books you actually remember? And number two, how do we know how much you actually understood? And
information retention.
Yeah, apply in real life. So that's part of my issue with a lot of this stuff. You see people like, no, we don't have that much time. I mean, Billy Carson leaves in 15 minutes. That's what I messaged y'all about earlier.
Damn, get out of here.
Yeah, he leaves in 15 minutes. We don't have 45 minutes left in the video. So yeah, keep in mind, y'all, when y'all are hearing this right now, that it's not just Wes is smart and Billy's dumb. It's not that Wes is a specialist in one area and Billy Carson has an expansive amount of information and a lot of different information, a lot of different knowledge disciplines. What it is that Wes is an actual intellectual and scholar who understands there's a methodology to every discipline. I remember I was sitting next to somebody one time and they were studying Islam because her boyfriend was Islamic and she wanted to study Islam. So I've been researching. I said, have you ever researched researching? She's like, what? I said, have you ever researched researching? She didn't know what I was talking about. That's what Wes is saying. There's a science to research. There's a method to whatever madness you choose to get involved with. And Billy was just uninformed and really didn't seem to really care too much about that, given how long he's been trafficking these ideas about that part of the discussion. But that's where all the work is done. The work is not done in reading the documents. The work is done is, okay, what's the epistemology associated with this particular part of this thing? What is it? Epistemology is how do we know what we know? The science of how do we know what we know? All right, we can go ahead.
One more comments before we get in. Baby Lund says, I respectfully say that you all did not address the issue. According to scripture, slavery is a punishment for sin.
Well, I want to say this. That is true, but the people that were put into slavery were the Israelites. Yeah, I mean, God's chosen people, they did go. Is that the same one?
Yeah, same
one.
one.
I wouldn't say we didn't address the issue. I mean, there's a lot to unpack with that, and we're probably not going to cover it all. But feel free to ask questions or put some comments. We can try to address them. But
was slavery created as a punishment for sin, or was it just?
Sorry, go ahead.
Or was it just a tool that was utilized that already existed?
Exactly.
All right,
that's the causality that we're talking about. The correlation causality. Slavery was used as a punishment for sin. Therefore, they must have, God must have created slavery. No,
but slavery was never right. So mind you, just because the Israelites were put under slavery with the Egyptians, doesn't mean it was ever right.
Yeah,
it was Joseph that was sold into slavery, right, by his brother, something like that. It doesn't mean it was ever right.
Yeah, your children don't like being whooped. They don't like being disciplined, but you do it because it's to send a message.
Absolutely
it's an established thing that they don't like, that they respond to. Y'all don't like slavery? Cool. Until y'all get it together, I'm gonna go ahead and put y'all in slavery.
All right.
You either believe in all of it or none of it. I'm like, well, how come you're
yes?
And they're like, but it's okay for women to do that now. Those are the things where it's like, we've got to be honest here. Like, if you're respectfully challenging Billy, Billy's going to go and do research and be like, okay, now I want to see how to have, because we're all critical thinkers.
No, he's not.
Those things tend to just get so blindly pushed over when they're like, but that doesn't apply now. And it's like, I think there's more common ground than people think, and so many words to recall, but also, like, it's weird to me to think that he would be like, women aren't allowed to wear jewelry and this crap.
Can we pause
and then
it right
Jesus
here?
came and he's like, none of that matters.
This is my issue with people using weird, and I've heard different platforms, different YouTubers use the word weird.
I use it today.
Yeah, use it today. I wasn't gonna call you out, but
that's all right. I'm here for that. I'm accountable.
But the thing is, I want people to understand nothing wrong with saying weird. Weird means strange. Weird means not normal, or you can say outside of the norm. But weird is not a claim of true or false. Things can be true and weird. Things can be false and weird. Things can be true and be the norm, and things can be false and be the norm. So I don't understand why people use that terminology when discussing the validity of certain things, because its weirdness doesn't have much of an effect on whether or not it's accurate.
Or not. Mm-hmm.
And it's not a real claim of anything. So if I'm talking, somebody goes, well, James, what you're saying is weird. All you're saying is it's not normal. Yes, sometimes there are going to be things that are counterintuitive. It goes against our intuition. It's not the norm. It's not what you would suspect it to be or expect it to be. So when people say weird, it's like they know consciously or subconsciously whatever they're getting ready to say, they can't prove or disprove it. They don't have really much to go off of. So all they can say is, they're saying, I don't like it.
No. I want to point out that that's not. I don't want to be lumped in with those people. I wasn't using it in that format. I recant my earlier statement. I'm not with them guys.
Hey, I'm not with those guys. This your man's?
And then for them to be like, oh, that only made sense then, but now it doesn't apply. But believe everything.
Right. So this is what's referred to.
You know what? Like,
yeah. So this is what's.
This is why, like, I'm always like.
Yeah. So there's a field. There's a discipline called hermeneutics, and that's the methodology of interpretation. So there are multiple levels that you interpret something. So whether we're dealing with, say, the book of Ephesians, or we're dealing with Tacitus's Annals, we look at something and we contextually read it within the framework of how it's being written. So there's a historical approach where we look at the context. Okay, Paul is writing to a church in Ephesus. What's going on in Ephesus, and how is what he's saying in that city in what is modern day Turkey? How does that pertain to that particular time and framework? Where is Paul coming from? Where is
now, though, is my question. Because
so here's how I answer that question.
And I love you to death, Wes, but you're starting to give me. Sorry I had to interrupt you. I believe in God. Like, I believe in and Billy believes in God too. I get
patient as
I get why things are challenged and things need to be challenged, but it's saying that was to women then, but being raised in the church
so it's
and
yes
stuff,
and no.
They say, but then they'll pick something and they're like, but that doesn't apply to them now. Because in that context, he was talking
while
about
he's asking the question.
This certain town where they were having problems with I'm like, well, that's not written anywhere. And they're like, well, if you go to blah blah blah, and then they say, well, God is all knowing, so he perfectly chose what was in and out of the Bible. I believe whoever created the universe, which is God, in my own opinion, is way smarter than any of us. Why would he leave something like that crap in there, that women shouldn't wear jewelry and all that, and then have in the New Testament that crap doesn't really matter? Like that's what it's like. I have to believe that it's not I do think there is parts where things got written in, and I don't think they're the major things personally, like whether or not Jesus was crucified, which I think is a major thing, because if he wasn't, that I've studied that a lot, that would challenge that would challenge the core of my whole belief system over whether or not it said if women can wear jewelry or something. But I do think that.
Can we pause it real quick here? I just want to say, all the folks out there, audience, keep in mind this, right? Anytime you're talking to somebody who's smarter than you, you want to be asking more questions than you are making statements.
So that's why you should like and subscribe to the channel. Please share.
Absolutely right. This is about being critical thinking. So what Mark is really saying here is, hey, look, I like to research and I like to learn, but at a certain level, I want to stop. And so Wes is going, there's a method behind that too. So we want to get into the context of what parts of the Bible, and he says later on in the video, the Bible was written for us, but not to us. It literally says a letter to the Ephesians, a letter to the Corinthians. That's an actual place of people that had stuff going on at that time. So yes, it wasn't written to me. It was written to the people at the church of Ephesus, the church of Corinth, and stuff like that. So he's saying there were things that were actually dealing with in the text. So Mark's issue is like, it doesn't look the way you want it to look. If you're saying if you were God, you'd have wrote it differently. But you're saying God is smarter than you. So exactly, like the way it was written doesn't mean that it was written wrong. That's not a claim of. That's not any kind of. He's not given any kind of reason that it's actually written wrong. He's just saying it's not as eloquent as I would think it would be on. And what isn't it's clear and cut.
Again, that's people trying to make the word align with their moral standards, their current moral standards. Like, I think this is wrong, and why would the Bible say it's okay? You're wrong. What is wrong? You're wrong.
Yeah, I think this is related. Dalai Lama T says, I love the intellectual aspect to Huff, but there are some things that can't be proved, even though they are true.
Yeah, I want to address that point right there, because there's definitely some truth to that, Dolly. But this goes into the verisimilitude thing again in philosophy. There's aspects where we can't get to the truth. Not everything's math. Not everything's logic. Not everything's science with physics, the physical world, right?
Not everything's provable beyond a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah,
some things are provable beyond a reasonable doubt.
Absolutely right. Some things are going to be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. Some things are going to be explanation of the best inference. We can infer that it's most likely to have happened this way, based off Occam's razor, based off of, other metrics like, explanatory power and explanatory scope, which we covered on the part 1 of this show. And so you got to understand that there is, in fact, times when we can't prove something. Look at popular trials like the OJ trial, or different trials that you've had. It's not about can you prove it's not about can you prove it definitively. Which one is most likely to have occurred based off the evidence we have available to us? And that's where Wes is doing an excellent job. So I agree with you, Dolly, on the fact that some things, you can't be proven, and I'm assuming you mean like more definitively. But we can say the evidence leans this direction, because in life sometimes we got to make decisions like who you're going to marry, what college you're going to go to. You're never going to know until you're experiencing it, and even that's limited, which one you should have chose. You're picking a certain job. At some point in time, you got to go faith and substance of things hoped for, and the evidence of what's unseen. The evidence, I can't see the end result. I can't see what's going to happen at the end of all this. So I got to make a decision in the here and now, in the present, based off what I know. I know this, I know that, I know this, I know that. So it seems that more than likely, this answer right here is going to be the best course to go. And last thing I'll say about this is so important, because people tend to put things in a black and white box of either you know it or you don't. We don't realize that there are tools available to us in epistemology, in philosophy, in logic, in reason that can get us closer to what the truth would be, so we can make more educated decisions, even if we'll never actually know for sure in that moment. And if you don't explore those things, there's many decisions you're going to make in life that you're not going to have the best information, the best evidence for, because you're not looking for, you're not asking the right questions, because you're going, well, I'll never know, so it's going to be a toss-up. Which I got. You're on mute. You're on mute. Mute.
Baby London outside the box says hermeneutics and verisimilitude are subjective points of view, not facts nor truth.
You want to address that? Want me to address that?
I have a hard time responding to some of these questions that don't. You go ahead.
See, hermeneutics and verisimilitude are subjective points of view, not facts nor truth. Babylon done outside the box. Is that what you just stated a fact or truth? Are you saying that all things, are you a relativist? Do you believe that all things are subjective? I want to know that, because I want to know what frame. If you're saying that all things are subjective and nothing is facts, I'm going to address that differently, because now we got to have a discussion on the ontological foundations of how you arrive at that particular belief, because that means any claim you would make, whether it's your name or you go to your job and say, hey, look, y'all mispaid me for my check. That's subjective. We don't think we mispaid you for your check. So are you saying that you think all things are relative, or you think just that those particular things right there are relative or subjective, points of view, and not facts nor truths? Because what undergirds hermeneutics and verisimilitude are facts and truths. So it may not be true altogether. And this one you're going to run into a fallacy of the division fallacy, or the composition fallacy, is saying what's true of the part is not true of the whole. Just because certain aspects of hermeneutics and verisimilitude are subjective doesn't mean the whole thing is subjective or not fact and truth based. There are aspects of it. It's like beauty. People say beauty's eye of the beholder. There's some truth to that. But they've done studies to find out that babies stare at pretty faces or attractive faces longer than they do less attractive faces. That's a reality. So there is some type of objectivity to some of these things, and there's subjectivity to it. Now, it's up to us to do our due diligence in discovering which parts of this, the whole, is subjective, which parts are objective. But if you throw the whole baby out with the bathwater and say it's all subjective, then you're going to miss a major science knowledge that you can utilize to be more effective in your research and confidence and explanations. So don't throw the baby out the bathwater. Babylon done outside the box. Let's think outside the box on this one.
Outside the box. LC said the creation of Council of Nicaea to formulate the Bible. When I followed the Bible, I assume it's true. Bible came from one event that produced the Bible. Out of another, am I within the lines of false cause?
Well, for me on this one right here, the Council of Nicaea didn't have much to do with the formulation of the Bible. The Council of Nicaea was more about the nature of Christ. What is his deity? That's where the Council of Nicaea developed what's called the Nicene Creed. And it has to do with the nature of the deity of Christ. So that's what the Council of Nicaea was really about. It didn't really do with the formation of the Bible. Creation of the Council of Nicaea to formulate the Bible. When I follow the Bible, I assume it's true. That's good. Bible came from one event that produced the Bible. The Bible didn't come from one event that produced the Bible, so that part would be false. Out of another. Am I within lines of false cause? Yeah, I really wish I understood the question a little bit better, but the Bible didn't come from one event. The Bible is a collection of 66 different books over 1,500 years and different parts of the world, not all in the same place, by over 40 authors. So it didn't come from just one event. The Bible is a collection of books.
And we actually, for the audience, if you go on our channel, like I said, remember to subscribe and share. We did an episode. The title was "Dark Conspiracy versus White Supremacy." Me, Fresh, and Vulcan actually broke down the Council of Nicaea. Really good video. I recommend y'all go ahead and watch that.
So let me read this right here. I'm gonna read just the part which is division versus composition, because I mentioned both of those, and it has them both in this little box here. The fallacy of division projects the properties of the composite on a part. The fallacy of composition projects the properties of a part on the composite. So the fallacy of division says that what's true of the whole is true of the part. That's the projecting the properties thing. Whatever properties is on the whole is also on the parts. So like saying, if an entire picture, you see a picture and you see, oh, this picture is black. But then you get closer in, you say, oh, wow, some other colors in there. Just the black kind of encompasses the whole thing. That's the division factor, assuming that just because the whole is a certain way means the part is a certain way. The composition fallacy is projects that the properties of a part is true of the whole. Just because something is true in a certain aspect of it doesn't mean the whole thing is like that. Mm-hmm. So if you look at a car, just because one part of a car is a tire, doesn't mean the entirety of a car is a tire. And so just keep that in mind whenever we're talking about these conversations, when we say something is subjective or something is this, or something is that. A lot of times we create these false dichotomies where something is either this or it's that. Sometimes some things are like that. That's the law of excluded middle. But sometimes there's a spectrum. And we gotta understand when there's a spectrum and when there's not. I'm ready, Enos.
I guess we got one more comment that's related to what we're talking about. Babylon, then outside the box, is subjective best inference versus objective, deductive truth, or even inductive facts. I'm not sure what that means. So
this writing right here, I'm not gonna lie. No.
Yeah.
No, I'm sure. I think Babylon. I think you're just on a different level than what the comment section can allow for to be communicated to us. You probably have to come on and be live and let's have that dialogue, because the writing is not communicating probably how sophisticated your message really is, your question really is. So I appreciate you commenting on there, and we got to have you on the show at some point in time, I think, because you have some insightful perspectives, and we can have a good exchange going. So shout out to you.
For sure, for sure.
And I don't know if there's an exact answer to this, but I do think, that's perplexing to me.
No,
the God of all wisdom would choose to leave some of that in there. It's like, why?
Yeah. So here's the thing. So the Bible was written for us, but it wasn't written to us. There is an original audience, whether that's the ancient Israelite in the ancient Near Eastern culture, or whether it's the Greco-Roman believer in Jesus within the city of Ephesus. So as historians, and I mean, most of the books on this end of my shelf are what are referred to as commentaries.
Sorry, I got to
theologians and historians.
Wouldn't God be smart enough to know I'm not just going to write to this demographic of this civilization now, knowing I'm a God who created the whole world, and people are still going to be studying this thousands of years later?
Yeah.
That's what I was going to say, but I didn't want to come off.
Yes.
So I'm sorry.
No. So
by the way,
here's how I would
I'm
answer
the
that,
worst
Mark.
interrupter ever, and it's never.
I'm not gonna make this part long, but this is how audacious and how egotistical we are as human beings. I'm not pointing this out to specifically take Mark, but just in general, we are. How Romans 9 would say is, who are you, O clay, to respond to him who made it and say, why have you made me this way? We are not in a position to really judge God. It'd be like an ant judging you. Now, I know not everybody's gonna like that answer, but that's the reality of it. Now, that aside, when we're thinking about what Mark is saying here, saying, isn't God smart enough to do that? Why is it an issue of intelligence? What's wrong with this guy hasn't really said what's wrong with the way it is right now. He's saying because people are confused about it, it means that it wasn't done the right way. People are confused by all kinds of different things. Those of us who work in the real world and with real people, I mean, how many times somebody have gotten something mistaken or messed up something? You're like, I didn't even know that could be messed up. You're talking to your kids, you're talking to a coworker, you're talking to somebody, your wife or your husband, and you give them instructions, and you're like, how did they mess that up? You can't. You befuddled. You're bereft of utterance. You can't imagine. Human beings, our minds are flawed. As Billy Carson is going to say, our minds are sick, and it's true. We are not the most logical beings. It's the purpose of the Vulcan soapbox. We're not very logical at times. We make mistakes. We see things that aren't there. We don't see things that are there. One thing we don't see that's there is our nose. Our nose is pretty much always in our vision. I'm looking at my nose right now, but our brain ignores it. So we don't see our nose when we're looking at everything. Our brain ignores certain things. We have selective hearing. People hear what they want to hear. So you can't say just because somebody misinterprets or doesn't understand something, it means that it should have been written differently. No, the person should step their game out and reading it, or get somebody who can understand things better than explain it to them. But Mark here is making the assumption that just because somebody doesn't understand it, it means that it can be done better, which is an insult to anybody who's ever written anything before, but especially to God. So nothing wrong with the Bible. The Bible. Look at the resume of the Bible. The stats of the Bible. Most sold book ever. Most stolen book ever. Came about, at a perfect time in history, with the expansion of human civilization. Going into print with the Gutenberg, whatever it's called, print and press, to be mass distributed to everywhere in the world. It's literally changed civilizations. It ended up ending slavery in the Western world. Modern science is built upon it. All the hospitals and orphanages you could think of, those are all, and education systems were developed and maintained by the church. Art, music, everything you could think of has done all these different things. The biggest religion in the world. And then Mark goes, it's not good enough. God was smart, he could have did better. Mark, what have you done on the Bible's level? That's what I want to know. You say it could have been done smarter and better.
Shout out to Mark. More comments for Ty. I think that's Ty Buzzed. Then when King James was in power, wanted a Bible that everyone could agree on and read in English, gathered 54 of the smartest linguists of the time and Catholic bishops, and after years of scrutiny. Shout out to Ty Buzzed.
I'm assuming there's a ... there.
Yeah, that's not true. One thing I recommend for you, Ty Buds, is a debate with Dr. James White and some other guy called King James Onlyism debate. Dr. James White has a really good breakdowns of this, and he has a book on King James Onlyism. I think that's the name of the book, actually. I can't remember, but no, that's not actually what happened. There was already an English version of the Bible that was already sanctioned by the state or the government under King James. The monk, I think Erasmus or whatever, he wanted to get a book himself, and so he dedicated it to the king. Let's say the King James Bible was like his way of getting around Bible that was already English Bible that was already, I think it was called the Great Bible or the Bishop Bible. I can't remember what the name of the Bible that was already in their possession, but the King James Bible came about and dedicated to the king. The King James has nothing to do with the translations of the Bible, none of that kind of stuff. And so just keep that in mind whenever you're looking at history. This goes back to what Wes is saying, primary source material. A lot of us, we read stuff on the internet and we go, oh, that must be true, I'm right about that. Look at the primary sources. What does it say about the King James and how the King James is constructed? Like I said, a good source is Dr. James White, but there's plenty of sources. I think Wes may even have videos on that for all I know. He has some pretty good videos, but no, King James had nothing to do with that. Next point.
Everybody that's in the chat, everybody that's watching, remember to like the video, get these likes up. Bobby Sweet says Billy conceded immediately without even a rebuttal. In the story, absolutely hilarious. He had no idea what he was talking about whatsoever and never has. LOL.
Yeah, my issue, Bobby Sweet, I appreciate you sharing that part right there, and I definitely agree with, I think, the heart of what you're saying. But again, this kind of goes back to my point about things existing on the spectrum. When you say he has no idea what he's talking about whatsoever and never has, that can alienate people who have found truth in what he's saying. Everything he's saying is not true. There really was a quote unquote Sinai Bible, even though it's not, nobody really calls it that, and he does say a lot of different things that are accurate, are true. Now his spin on it, his perspective on it is another thing, but it does exist. And so whenever we say he's talking about whatsoever, and we do that kind of a thing, if the goal is to help other people be educated on the topics and not to be beguiled by him, we can't say everything is bad that he says. It goes back to what we're talking about, the composition fallacy and the division fallacy. Just because there's a lot of stuff that he says that's false doesn't mean all of it's false. Just because of some stuff he says that's true doesn't mean all of it's true. So, but he has been disseminating a lot of lies for a long time, but he has said some things that are pretty accurate as well. And this show is about eating the meat and spit out the bone, but also teaching everybody to be Bereans and to look at the information, know how the science works, the epistemology works, to determine what is true and what is not. And when we can't determine what's true and what's not, we're going to determine what explanations have the highest probabilities of being true. And that goes back to what Babylon was talking about earlier, I believe, or LC, or one of them had brought that up in the comments. Sorry, go ahead.
It's more of my ADD type thing of like, I get a thought and I got to get it out or else I freaking forget it. So
you said ED?
I'm sorry about interrupting. Thanks for throwing me under the bus for forget it. So type thing of like, I get a thought, interrupt or ever, and it's more of my ADD type thing of like, I get a thought and I got to get it out or else I freaking forget it. So I'm sorry about interrupting.
He said ADD.
Thanks for throwing me under the bus for that.
Yeah. So, how I would answer that is I would say this. So you do have examples of where Paul is writing, and he's writing to a particular group. And so we look at, okay, what does it mean for a woman to wear and adorn themselves with gold in a first century Greco-Roman context, right? It has to do with the fact that prostitutes would wear those things. So we need to ask the question, what is the intention of the text? Yes, I gotta ask we can you again, take the meaning.
But how do you interpret that's what I've been, the reason I'm interrupting you is I've heard this. I've been there, done that.
Yes.
I respect the crap out of you for how deep you go into studying the ancient texts and stuff, which is so important for the real root of it all. But they've told me that same thing, and I'm like, but why doesn't it just say that he was speaking to the women that were prostitutes of that time? Like where does that correlate?
He's not speaking to prostitutes. He's talking about purity. and he's talking in the context of when he says, you know, don't adorn yourself with jewelry. The original audience, and we can explore this by the historical
realize
analysis.
how dumb that sounds? Saying the original audience, then later on saying, but now it's okay for this audience because these women and stuff.
No, because it's the point that he's making.
I get why people like if we're gonna we got to be open minded. We're punching holes in other stuff to punch holes in our own, and even if it's agreeing, like it's. Don't you think that's a little? I get what you're saying. Like,
you don't.
If prostitutes at that right now, if prostitutes all wear a red band around their neck, and that signals what all prostitutes are, and it's like, don't wear that.
Prostitutes have tattoos, and a lot of women who aren't prostitutes have tattoos.
Right. I don't think it's this black and white that only the prostitute, and also you're only talking about in one little town. So my bigger question would be to God.
Well, in Greco-Roman antiquity,
why did you put that in the Bible?
So
that just confuses everyone, though, because all these other civilizations are
pause
going to be
real quick?
We keep saying here.
Yeah, again, okay. He said it confused everyone. No, it's going to confuse everyone. It's confusing you and certain other people. But confusion is okay. That's the first thing. Okay, you introduce a concept, somebody's confused. Okay, what do we do afterwards? Confusion is not the end all be all. Confusion is not like if there's confusion, there's a problem. Again, that's a narcissism again. We think because we're confused, it means that there's problems in and whatever we're confused about. No, the problem could be very well being you. Your limited understanding of things, your limited intelligence, your limited whatever, your limited height, whatever it is. We're all human beings. We're fallible. We're limited in so many different ways. But Mark's insistence that just because he's confused or people are confused, it means it's written wrong, is very narcissistic. Very egotistical, very myopic. We got to do better, folks out there. If I'm confused, when I'm confused about something, the first thing I think is like, what did I say it again? I think I'm tripping. Say it again.
I don't understand it.
What did you say?
I was saying anytime I hear something that doesn't make sense, I assume that I misunderstood or that I'm not getting it right, and then I ask for clarification. I don't just assume it's, you know, you're dumb unless I'm listening to this guy.
Yeah, exactly.
Give me a tumor.
Don't be like this, audience. Don't think just because you're confused it means something's wrong. It could have been done better. People always say, "Oh, it's confusing." That means it could have been done better.
Yeah, you don't understand quantum physics. That doesn't mean quantum physics is wrong.
Yeah,
it means you don't understand it. You don't. Goodness gracious.
He knows.
Put that in the Bible. Men put this stuff in the Bible.
And I think that was some of the old, I'm telling you, Billy, it's for me, I think he'll get back on. If it wasn't for sorry, we got you back on, Wes.
Yeah. I understand what you're saying, Mark, but what I'm saying is I think we're missing a big point here. The point that I'm trying to make here is that the Bible is written by people. Men who are extremely flawed. And the evidence of that is what they took the information that's in that biblical text and what they did with it globally to other human beings, and how they even wrote about it in the Bible, how they enslaved and tortured people in the biblical text. So in that case, even in the book of Deuteronomy, which is one of the most brutal books out there, where everything is given okay to rape women, kill children. If one person talks against your Lord, go to that town and kill the whole town, burn the town down.
So brutal.
It's just too much. Like I said,
or turns people into salt.
The killing in the Bible is not being done by Satan. That's why I don't care. I don't believe in demons and all this other kind of stuff. Moses goes to the top. He talks to God. He gets his tablet. The first commandments are, "Thou shalt not kill." He comes down. As soon as he sees the people making a golden calf, he kills most of them. It's just like, come on. It's just ridiculous.
And I've learned with some of these stories how it correlated with kill your first son related to then what happened with Jesus. But I'm still like, in my head, they're like, that's so beautiful. He was willing to sacrifice his son as God would. And I'm like,
I don't believe
that's so mean that God,
I don't believe it's beautiful.
like,
that's so mean.
Jesus changed my whole story. No, right now? When I'm in heaven, and I don't believe God is irrational, because he would be smarter than every one of us to be able to literally create everything. I would be like, God, I don't like, why would you tell that dude to kill his son.
I don't see any benefit in killing
like,
your
what-
own kid.
And then
I think-
right at the last second, he's like, no, it's cool. I was just testing your faith in me. It's like, that seems psychologically, to me, when God's like, kill your own son, but then at the last minute,
It's sadistic.
don't do it.
That's
Oh man, you
Abraham.
proved your faith to me.
I'm glad that he
God,
keeps
isn't there
saying
like
to
a,
me,
I don't
or
feel
I
like
don't
need to do that
understand.
to a person.
You know, this
I
really
don't-
reminds this really reminds me of my interaction with my kids sometimes, where, you know, they'll be like, "Well, you doing it? How come I can't do it?"
You not me.
Sometimes you can't drink. I can. You can't join the military. I can. You can't smoke. Not that I endorse smoking, you know, but you can't. I can legally. There are differences, and that's just on a human level. Not even bringing in a being far beyond any of us. That I'm closer to my kids than, you know, I'm closer to God as far as ability and capacity to understand things. And it's just funny because just because this guy is so focused on the fact that he doesn't get it, he doesn't understand that it's nothing to do with God or the text, is crazy.
What he's really not saying is not that he doesn't get it. He just doesn't like it.
Yeah.
He wants biblical text to align with his current sense of morality.
Yeah, and people gotta understand, whenever he's a new convert, is my understanding. And so anytime you're assimilating into a new perspective or belief system, you gotta understand that you're not all the way there yet. You brought a certain sense of morality with you, and that's gonna have to be sharpened and honed and changed and done away with and built back up after it's been broken down, because we're not perfect.
I also don't fault him for asking these questions, because it's okay if you don't understand these things. I just think he probably shouldn't be asking it on this platform, because it's kind of showing his ignorance and his newness as a Christian.
And the main thing is he took away from the discussion we could have had. All of his talking,
He's not even being concise and succinct with his questioning. He's really like stumbling through this, while Wes is just looking at him like, "You got a question?" Or
Wes's patience is something to be admired. We're gonna follow him as he follows Christ. How about that?
I don't think that's such a beautiful story. And I'm talking as a Christian. There's a lot of things with the Old Testament I struggle with, but it doesn't change my overarching beliefs. And I think there is things that are written in, maybe misinterpreted, that aren't as important as the bigger things, like the crucifixion and stuff of Jesus. Like, I'm hoping to God that your methodology of proving that is right compared to Billy's in that specific scenario. But in some of these other things, like, I almost rather them be disproved, that God killed his that God and I've heard a lot of these different answers and stuff, and I know God gave us free will, and I understand all that too, but it's just like the God of the Old Testament and Jesus, it's hard to believe that they're the same person.
Yeah, sorry, I cut out quite a bit there, and so I think I missed a large portion, so I apologize for that.
And I'm just,
I might get to say a lot of stuff that I want to say. Go ahead.
Yeah, so let me just say this. So the most quoted verse of the Bible in the Bible is a version of Exodus 34:6, which fundamentally describes who God is, that he's compassionate and loving, full of grace and mercy, and abounding in steadfast love. And so, in fact, if you read the book of Jonah, the beef that Jonah has with God, the reason why he doesn't want to go to Nineveh, is because he believes that God is so loving that if he tells the Ninevites to repent and they repent, God is going to forgive them. So fundamentally, we have the picture of God consistently throughout the Bible, both in the Old and New Testaments, as being a God who is rich in love and mercy and abounding in steadfast kindness. And so we want a God who is just. And just to speak very briefly to the slavery issue, I mean, Leviticus 25 condemns by death the man stealing. So stealing someone and selling them into slavery. And the fact that the 10 Commandments are prefaced with, you are a nation who was slaves. You know, I'm the God of Israel who brought you out of Egypt. So there's a fundamental difference, and there's lots of literature on this. I would encourage people to read my friend Paul Copan's book, Is God a Moral Monster? He's written some excellent stuff. He's also written on Did God Command Genocide in the Old Testament? He's a leading expert in the field of a comparative analysis of ancient Near Eastern war literature. And so there are very coherent explanations for these things, and that slavery within ancient Israel was very, very different from what slavery around the ancient Near East was like. And on top of that, once again, when abolition movements happen, what's that? Sorry, Billy?
I said slavery continued on throughout the Bible with no problems.
But it was always undergirded by the fact that this was not the ideal, that this was something that should not be done. And even slavery within ancient Israel was fundamentally different than slavery around the ancient Near East. This is not a contested fact. You can look at the scholarship of individuals like Wright, who's written extensively on this. He's an ancient Near Eastern ethicist, and there's vast difference between the law codes in Leviticus, Deuteronomy, and Numbers, and something like the Code of Hammurabi, which puts people on a tier system and gives different punishments depending on where they are within society. That's not true in ancient Israel. If you were a king and you stole somebody and you sold them into slavery, they would punish you by death.
But you steal somebody else's slave. You can't steal somebody else's slave. That's not a good thing to do, right? The point that I'm making here, I got to say something before I get out of here, is the Bible is full of contradictions. The biggest problem that we have is we're dealing with a civilization on this planet that is psychologically impaired. Human beings are psychologically impaired. This entire planet. We're living on an insane asylum. Earth is an absolute insane asylum. Mental illness has spread throughout the planet Earth like a complete virus. And when you take a text like the biblical text, knowing that human beings globally are mentally ill, this entire planet is a mental insane asylum. And I'm talking everyone. All 8 billion, whatever number of people we have now, are all mentally ill. And what I mean is there's different levels of mentally ill. We all have trauma that we're not dealing with. We all have internal issues. We all have situations that shadow work that needs to be done. And some people are at higher levels of mental illness than others. Most of us are functional mental illness people. But when you take a look at the biblical text and you start going through this information, and it's the way that it's laid out, it becomes a proponent of more divide and conquer tactics. It becomes a proponent of racism. It becomes a proponent of slavery. It becomes a proponent of all these things that are dark and ill, including murder and killing in the name of God, which has been done how many millions of times. So my thing about the biblical text is it actually authored by the creator of the universe, or is it authored by the dark forces of, maybe, if this Satan is real, Satan himself? And the reason why I say that is because all-knowing, all-loving God, omnipotent and omniscient, that is creating not only this universe, probably most likely multiple universes, because a creator never stops creating, especially with infinite power, is now at some point going to author a text that is going to allow human beings to misinterpret it and take it in his name and begin to slave people, torture people, and enslave people worldwide, to claim that you're chosen ones, to set up a state of.
So people gotta understand, like, the slippery slope that he's on right now. If he said God's gonna allow people to misinterpret it, so then where do you draw the line? If you don't allow people to misinterpret things, you don't allow people to do certain things anymore. They can't misunderstand you. They can't interrupt you. Then we become robots at that point. If you're gonna want God to get involved in every aspect of human deficiency, then you're not gonna have a life anymore. And remember, God's primary focus, according to the scriptures, is not for us to be perfect in how we interpret things, all that kind of stuff. We should strive to be that, but our primary goal, according to the scriptures, is for salvation. So Billy Carson is describing a certain role or responsibility to God that he's not under. People are going to misinterpret things because human beings are flawed. So him attributing some kind of negative characteristic to God because us human beings don't do the right things. Y'all gotta hear it for what it really is. Billy Carson, he's being deceptive and dishonest. Is that how he parents? If his kids misunderstand something he said, does that mean he's a bad parent? I got in trouble sometimes when I misinterpret my parents. Like, boy, you know I didn't say that. Bop. Go ahead,
chosen people, and then to even claim that you have chosen land and to torture and kill even more people, women and children in modern times, still going on till this very day. To me, that doesn't seem like a very intelligent being, especially a being that knows the beginning and the end. So if you know the beginning and the end, you have a certain level of foreknowledge. You have advanced knowledge that goes beyond. You know what's the ending before the end even occurs. So you set up everything for success. Why? Because a genius solves problems before they happen. And I'm going to drop the mic on that.
with some of that too, I think came back on.
Yeah.
God obviously has solved a lot of problems before they've happened. A lot of problems that happened and solutions that happened in the Bible was all foretold by God before the world was. So his point on that, I get it, but it's not an accurate point according to the theology that Christians hold to. So he's not making a point that's very convincing. But he's talking about human nature and the fact that human beings do flawed things and attribute it to God's lack of foresight. Again, that's a fallacy. You got to know what God's purpose is for you to critique him on how he did what he did. God's purpose is salvation. He takes what men mean for evil and uses it for good. That's a direct quote from the Bible. What they meant for evil, God meant for good. God can utilize our mistakes and our flaws to accomplish his desired end, and an end that's in the best interest of those who believe in him. So just keep that in mind as Billy Carson is communicating that he just doesn't get the theology. My understanding, he was raised in the church at some point in time, was punished with different scriptures and stuff like that to have to recite them or whatever the case may be. I don't know if that's what gives him the sour grapes, but if you want to believe what you want to believe what you want to believe. But the issue with Billy Carson is that he has fallacious reasoning in what he wants to believe. And that's what we're here to talk about in the local soapbox, the fallacious reasoning. Reason properly. Disagree, but your reasoning to be valid, meaning it's grounded in logic. So that's all I want to say about the last part of what he said. Anybody else got anything?
You said earlier you wanted to address the Occam razor. Do you want to cover that?
If you want to post it up there, you can. If you want to put it on the screen, you can.
All right. So Occam razor, this is the definition. Occam razor is the principle in philosophy and problem solving that suggests that the simplest explanation requiring the fewest assumptions is often the correct one. It does not guarantee the truth or the simplest explanation, but rather encourage minimizing unnecessary complications. Its core message is don't multiply entities beyond necessity. Examples, lost keys. Instead of assuming you've been robbed or there's a household ghost, Occam's razor would suggest you simply misplace them.
Yes.
You simply. So yeah.
I had a coworker who was saying him and his wife were getting into it because he couldn't find his charger. So he was getting into it with his wife and ultimately had to apologize to her because the charger was in the couch right next to where he sits every time he sits on the couch.
Wow.
In between the couch. So instead of multiplying an entity, saying my wife or whoever else got involved in this thing, and that's why this is missing, one entity, which was him, was better off assuming that and then looking at the place where he himself would go where the charger could be missing. And that's exactly what Occam's razor is saying. The simplest explanation is usually the best explanation. Not always. This goes back to a comment that was made earlier. The idea that we can't always get to the truth, but we want to use probabilities based on our understanding of how to verisimilitude and other concepts that are available to us to figure out, okay, like what is most likely to happen? What's the best explanation based off the information we have available to us?
And get the closest to the truth. Like we mentioned this before, you see that in other fields. You see that doctors do that. when they try to cure certain diseases, or you see that in the the justice system. You know, when they investigate certain crimes, they try to investigate, right? That's a part of critical thinking, interrogating the world with certain methods you use to get closest to the truth. Shakur P said, "You keep quoting the Bible. What are the other sources?"
Now, anybody want to address this?
I think Shakur P.
He's talking to you.
Yeah, he's addressing you.
Oh, how y'all know that? But okay, I'll address it.
Assumption. No, I'm joking.
Don't multiply.
The closest thing to the truth is you the only one that's been you've been quoting the Bible the most.
So the answer to Shakur's question, that's Shakur, that's a good question right there. But the answer is this: when we say keep quoting the Bible, what are your other sources? I got two questions for that. One, do you understand the Bible is a collection of books?
A library.
Throughout a 1,500-year time span by over 40 different authors in multiple languages. Those are all different attestations from a historical standpoint. The second part I want to make to you is, why are we saying outside of the Bible? The Bible is, whether you believe it's inspired teachings or not, it is an account of events that have taken place. If I start writing about stuff right now in America and I create my own religion called the Samsung Galaxy religion, and I start writing things that are happening in America, just because it's a religious book doesn't mean that the stuff that I'm mentioning in the book is not accurate. Now, you may not believe a lot of my theological perspectives, but if I say, yeah, I picked up a mug that said this on this day, that's an account. That's an eyewitness account. That's a primary source document of account. You got to understand that historians don't always look at the Bible as inspired writing. They look at it as a historical document.
Yeah.
With corroborating stories inside of there.
Yeah.
You want a good read, look at C.S. Lewis, who was an atheist, who became a Christian based off of this methodology. Another guy, a more recent one, is Lee Strobel, wrote a book called The Case for Christ. An atheist guy who was married to a Christian woman, and he wanted to disprove the Bible, but he's a journalist. He's a law journalist. And he went from being an atheist to a Christian because when he looked at the methodology used in a courtroom, it more than proved the Bible was accurate and correct. So, Shakur, you got to understand that there's no need to look outside the Bible. There are sources, Josephus. There's all kinds of sources. Also, there's the patriarchs of in the church that wrote about the Bible. There's all kinds of different sources which you can Google online if you really want to. I just named a few names, Josephus and stuff like that. But Pliny the Younger. There's all kinds of different names out there. But my point is saying that people wrote about the historical events, biblical events outside of the Bible. But you don't really need to go to that to get a historical account, because the Bible, which is a collection of books, talks about those different things. Don't disqualify the Bible because it wasn't like it's one person that wrote all this stuff in there that could have some kind of an agenda. It's over 40 authors that wrote it. Those are all different vantage points, different eyewitnesses, different people that are telling a very similar story. That's
different time frames, different places.
That's good evidence that it's likely to be true.
Yeah.
So excellent point, Shakur, on that one right there. But then you said here that doesn't make sense because it's mad stuff that's not logical in the Bible. Well, you got to point them out. You got to tell me what it is that you think doesn't make sense. And you said logical sense. That's a whole other can of worms we can get into about where you get logic from.
Shakur Peace also said, "Man, I'm out this low vibration."
Who's being low vibrational? You gotta say a better point. You gotta make an actual real point.
Yeah.
Just because you're unfamiliar with the historical methods used to be determine the accuracy of something doesn't mean that it's low vibrational. You just gotta step your intellectual game up, player.
Oh snap! Yes, Ty Bud said intuition, a spiritual discernment, ruling out Babylon, done outside the box. Says so it's simpler to accept Jesus died and did not resurrect, applying or using Occam razor. So it's simpler to accept Jesus died and did not resurrect, applying or using Occam razor. I'm not sure what that means. So Dolly Lamas T said people with higher consciousness wrote the Bible. Okay.
Anybody got to think that?
Nah, I wouldn't say high consciousness, but it has been on record. Like when you look at a lot of historical facts, Moses was an experienced writer after a while. I don't know if he was on a lot of the writers was higher consciousness. I haven't seen a lot of evidence on that, but yeah, that's all I have.
So I'll say this: when it comes to having a higher consciousness.
So he said, so explain St. John. I guess adding on to his comment. So explain St. John.
I mean, I'm assuming he's talking about John in the Bible. I mean, I got to have more context on that right there to really be explaining things. But I don't know what you mean by higher consciousness. I didn't have that defined for me first. I know people use it all the time loosely, but I don't want to be hitting a target that's not moving. I don't want to hit a target that's moving. I'd rather hit a target that's in one spot.
That's a good point. But now, it's just Christmas time. I think we should address, I've been seeing a lot of people online talking about that Christmas is a pagan holiday. So I wanted to, since we're at the end of the Billy Carson show, I want to go ahead and play this video and get y'all thoughts on this, if y'all don't mind. But before I do that, I guess I could put up somebody else just put something in the comments. All right, so yeah, I'm not understanding. Well, do you got anything else you want to address while I'm looking up this video?
No, I think we can end on this. No, we don't gotta go into that video.
Okay,
cool. I think it's just important. Shakir Peace is saying, okay, Dolly, sure it was, which is why they use it to keep our consciousness low and in fear of a sky daddy throwing us to hell, right? Who is the they? Why they use it to keep our conscience low? Anybody has the ability, if they want to read the Bible or read theology if they want to. It doesn't. There's no they. There's not some kind of monolithic structure that's forcing it upon us. So, Shakir, why is it there's some kind of conspiracy theory on somebody keeping our consciousness low? What spirituality or religion would you put in the place of Christianity? Can you answer that question? Because for the audience, I want the audience to hear this right here, is that there's only two types of religions or spiritualities. There's organized religions and disorganized ones. That's it. You got organized ones, you got disorganized ones. Are you saying that we should put a disorganized one that's not written down, when that's not scalable, when it hasn't built societies or helped develop the scientific discovery, and place that over what we have in place? The Abrahamic faith, like Islam, Christianity, Judaism? Is that what you're suggesting? You got a Dr. Umar guy? You a Zoe Williams guy? So that's what I want to know. Like, what is he saying? Let us know. Let us know in the comments.
Let us know. Thank y'all for joining us, and thank you for tuning in. This is the Vocus Soapbox. I'm Enos. Please remember to like and subscribe to this channel. Like the video and share. Well, like we open book, we do have a high tolerance for dissenting views. You can see that we're addressing some views that we might not necessarily agree with, but let's have an open dialogue so we all can get closer to the truth.
Yeah, that's what's up. Sorry, y'all. Vulcan Soapbox out. Please like and subscribe. Thanks for supporting the work. Share. And if you want to be on the show, definitely hit us up. Let us know. We're definitely open to it. Let's have a good dialogue and discussion and increase the critical thinking in this crazy world we live in. Peace.
All right, peace.